They should have said the poet. The poet. They should have said the poet. The poet.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast about ideas. Our goal is to understand metaphorical truths within the beauty we find in the human experience. Sending Poets.
The intersection between Paul and Phil is where everyone should be. My name is John. With me is Bob and Tucker. What's up, fellas?
Hey, good morning.
We're going to dive into the topic of politics today. So that haiku I just read, I should clarify, Paul and Phil are not the names Paul and Phil. These are abbreviations, POL, Paul, and Phil, PHIL. Abbreviations of politics and philosophy. So this is a haiku that we wrote in April of 2021. Kind of struggled to find exactly where it came from, but it had something to do with a post from the Chive that Tucker had shared, and there were some extra words that went with this that I kept track of, and I'm going to read those. I thought this is a pretty profound statement here that some people are philosophers and some are politicians. Philosophers want to reach truth and understanding. Politicians want to win. Helped me rethink some relationships, how hard I was working to reach the other person and find understanding with them when they just wanted to win. So we thought this was a great place to start from because the political climate, this is apropos, like American election is coming up. And it's very divisive, and there's this idea about wanting to win, and we're thinking let's kind of come at it from a different angle and not worry so much about who's winning, who's losing. What are some solutions here? What are some things we could do different that actually might make a difference? So that's kind of where the genesis of this episode's coming from. So Bob has made a good point, like starting from a place of common ground definitions. Why don't we just start there? Bob, do you mind maybe just hitting some of those baseline kinds of things?
Yeah. But before we start, philosophy, off the top of my head, and double check me with Google if you guys have a second. I believe it's love of knowledge. So, right, philosophy. I believe it is love of the breakdown of that word is love of knowledge. I don't know what politics is.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I'd like to know what the derivation of politics is, but I'm reminded of Philadelphia, the brotherly love, and philosophy is love of knowledge or
love of wisdom.
Love of wisdom. Thank you. Love of wisdom. So I'm 100% behind that. I love that haiku, John, and love that quote, Tucker. That's where we should start, meaning from our point of view of loving the knowledge or the wisdom and not trying to win the war, as it were. Okay. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about, governance, not politics, governance. So a system of government. What I love is I don't know of a better, more beautiful idea than the current American style system of governance. I literally don't know of a better human invention, perhaps Darwin's evolution. I'm trying to think of what is more beautiful and impactful in all of humanity other than a system of governance that was given to us a couple hundred years ago. So bow down to the profound nature. It's hard to think of what it was before, by the way.
Right.
Like we take it for granted, like cars, like electricity, like, metallurgy, things like if you didn't have that to start with, you would find them quite dear. And I find the founding fathers the same way in our system of governance. So let's talk about the big three: the constitutionally constrained, democratically elected representative republic. That's the big three that we're dealing with, and that is so profound and beautiful. So constitutionally constrained. Really like the concept that our federal government, and by the way, we have state, local, and federal. These are separate components. A lot of times people talk about the government, big air quotes there,
Right.
without differentiation between, are we talking state and local, or are we talking federal? And it's extremely important, in my opinion, extremely important to define what side of the line of demarcation we're on when we're talking about governance.
Yeah.
Because different rules apply, and this is the crux of the issue, is that the federal government only has powers which are granted and enumerated to it, whereas state and individual people essentially have all powers or freedoms except those which are restricted from it. So one more time, just so we're clear, the federal government is only supposed to do what it's allowed to do. It doesn't have a carte blanche with restrictions. It's only allowed to do what it's allowed to do through a constitution. This is 10th Amendment. Whereas the states themselves, and all states have a constitution, of course, for themselves, the states themselves and all individual rights are unbound until you get, you can't kill somebody, or you can't,
Whatever the law happens.
whatever
to
the
be.
law is. Yeah. So you get restrictions, but anything so we don't have to get permission, is the point, to do something new or to have a freedom. So
Is it fair to draw that comparison of, because I hear this in other contexts, but I think it fits here, of like, what I've heard in the context of like Facebook, it's better to beg forgiveness than to ask permission. Is it at the state, local level, it's kind of that, whereas at the federal, it's more of the no, ask permission first, than as opposed to begging forgiveness. Do you think there's this commonality there, or is it maybe too?
No, I think that's analogous, but bigger picture, it's more about, in my opinion, it's more about freedom, meaning, imagine you're running around, okay, in an open field. You as an individual human being or your state is running around in an open field, and there's going to be certain areas that are taped off. Can't go here on the grass, can't go here on the flowers, don't jump off this cliff. That's stupid. Whereas the federal government is in a prison, and it's allowed to go out for rec time. It can go out into this little yard here at this time. It can go to mealtime in the cafeteria at this point. It can go to the showers at this point, but it's in a cell. It's not allowed to go out anywhere it wants. So we're free with boundaries. The federal government, meaning the states, and the individual people, citizens of this country, are free to do what we want. Unbound. We are free. Now, there are some restrictions. You can't walk on my flowers, blah, blah, blah. But the federal government is only allowed to go to rec time when it's rec time. It's only allowed to walk the yard when I say it can walk the yard. It can only go eat when we say it can go eat. It can only go take a shower. It's not allowed to just do whatever it wants.
Gotcha.
And I think this is the point of where we should start this conversation, to stipulate, is this true or is this not true? Because we've gone so far in common knowledge, I feel, so far that it almost seems alien to say these words.
Well, I was going to say, this is new to me. So, yeah, I don't think I'd ever heard it described that way.
But do we have agreeants? Is this because what I do want to do is I keep on saying stipulate. So we're agreeing that these are the facts. These are this is the case we find at hand before we begin going in and making our case about why it's like this or what we should change. Do we all agree that according to the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and if you guys could look this up for me, because I don't have it in front of me, if you could just read it off.
Yeah. Well, what you put in the agenda, maybe I should Do you
Well,
want
how
me
about
to go?
Tucker? Tucker, somebody look it up. Just doing it. Just
Any
do a fact check.
powers not given to the federal government or prohibited by the Constitution from being given to the states are reserved for the states or the people. So basically, if the federal government isn't explicitly granted the rights to do something, it is up to the states to determine how
What to
that
do
is
about it.
handled.
Yeah.
Or the people themselves.
Yep.
So the federal government is let's go back to the founders. They are rebelling against a monarchy.
Right.
They are breaking an empire up. They are terribly afraid of a king. Okay. They do not want rule by man. They want rule by law. And the first thing they're going to do is chain this motherfucker down. They do it two ways. One is 10th Amendment. The second is breaking up into three branches what is a rule of government. So we have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. So obviously, executive branch is President of the United States, Commander in Chief. The judicial is the courts, and the legislative is broken into a House of Representatives and a Senate. And so we got a lot of stuff going on there, but the key is that the founders are breaking up what was a monolithic, all-powerful, almost a deity level of governance, where the man makes the laws, into a rule-based system constrained by the Constitution. So it's constitutionally constrained. That's where we're starting with. Constitutionally constrained. Democratically elected. So democratically elected is very powerful. And we can reflect back on the change in times, meaning what one would have at the founding fathers' age, what one would have thought of as the voting population is not indicative of what we have today. So let's acknowledge there was slavery. Let's acknowledge females did not have votes. We still have parameters in that you can't vote at 12. You can't be a preschooler and go cast a vote. So that we have parameters. You can't be in some places, in some contexts, you can't have a felony on your record. So there are some things that we can talk about, or be in prison. I think if not, sometimes felony takes away indefinitely or for a period of time the citizen's right to vote. Sometimes it's while you're serving a sentence in jail or prison. It's unlawful to vote, etc. Obviously, citizenship. So if you're a non-citizen but a guest of our country, a tourist, a non-citizen resident, you're not allowed to vote. So there are things in here that we can talk about that are restricting of that. But let's acknowledge the fact that democratic vote has meant different things throughout the time. So once upon a time, I believe the prerequisites were male, adult, landowning. White. Thank you, John. Obviously white. So free landowning, because there were European slaves, indentured servants, people who came over without freedoms, that were bound to a contractual obligation to work without pay. Maybe not the same as chattel slavery, but there were people who were not land owners, and they were looked upon as second or third class, if humans at all. So we're talking about obviously hundreds of years in the past, but we have to acknowledge these things were constrained. Where we've taken off the constraints, obviously slaves are no longer legal. Anyone who was a slave was granted citizenship, and the males of the slave population, once again, sucks to be a female slave, I assume, because even after slavery was abolished, only the male slaves were allowed to be voting.
That happened first, and then women got the right to vote afterwards, right?
Exactly. So But here we find ourselves democratic. Let's just talk about the principle of a democracy. The principle of the democratic process is one man or woman, one person, one vote. Let's just say one person, one vote. Obviously, with the caveats, you can't be 12 years old, and etc. So one person, one vote. But let's just say a very rich let's say Bill Gates, his vote is the same as my vote.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
We each have one vote, and you don't get a weighted average of votes based on how many acres you own or how many zeros is in your bank account or whatever.
Or whether you've had kids or anything like that.
100%. So it's one person, one vote, and that's the democratic process. But we're not in a democracy. Plain and simple. I think this is another common description that we have been using. We are in a democracy. We're in a democratically elected representative republic. So let's talk about the representative republic. So we are in a case of electing people that represent our interests from the state and local level and to govern us at the executive branch on the federal level. So we don't actually vote in a democracy, as it were. We don't vote on issues. We don't vote for policy. We don't vote for laws. These things are taken care of at a representative level. So people are vying to be those representatives. These are, our senators, our House of Representatives.
And that's what we vote on, right? We're voting for those people to be in those positions.
Exactly. So we're in this combination of democracy and republic, representative republic. So another thing is the republic itself. So we are not in a singular state apparatus. We have blocks of territories. So going back and thinking of the original colonies and wanting to break off from Great Britain, these colonies wanted to collectivize. They wanted to form a union, but still remain separate. So it wasn't just one giant state where we all became whatever, America. It wasn't like that. It was the ability to leverage certain aspects of characteristics of each colony, meaning the two broad selection criteria are population and land or geography. So there's this trade-off, because if you had, let's say you wanted to form a new union today between California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, something like that. You could form a union, but if you do not anticipate having blocks of governance based off of geography, it's literally just California. We would all agree, right? There's like 40 million people in California. And all the other states I named together, I don't think make 40 million people. So you do have to account, if you're going to make a binding union of people who were once separate, you're going to have to make accommodations to allow for the powers of some of these individual states or locations to maintain themselves. Otherwise, if it's a purely popular vote, whatever the more popular state or city is will dictate the whole shooting match. And so in order to make a United States of America, not just one new giant state, there was this tension or compromise between number of votes and the location itself, such that the senators are apportioned 2 per state. The House of Representatives are apportioned according to the population itself.
So the more population, the more representatives.
Correct.
Yeah.
And these districts would then be updated. I believe it's every 10 years on the census. I believe we reallocate representatives according to population.
Yeah.
But you end up with something like, say, Rhode Island versus California, and they each have 2 senators. So if you're a citizen of Rhode Island and you're voting for a senator, your vote has so much more weight than, say, an individual. Let's just say let's just say 1 million people in Rhode Island. I don't know exactly. Let's just say 1 million people. And you have 40 million people in California. Well, you each get to share 2 senators. So there is a per capita disparity there. Same thing goes with electoral college votes. So at the federal system, voting for president, vice president of the United States, these are not popular votes to determine the outcome. It is an electoral college where each state has a certain number of electoral college votes that are then apportioned according to the number of, who gets the majority in that state. So if you had California, let's just do hypothetical, says 20 million people, and you had 21 million people vote for candidate X. Well, all of those electoral votes then go to candidate X. But if you had 40 million people vote for candidate X, it's still the same number of electoral votes. So it's regardless of how far above the majority line you get, the number of votes cast for that state towards the federal presidency, the executive office, is capped at the electoral votes for the state of California or any other state. So we have this balancing act between population and the territory itself. And this doesn't go without contention as well. This also goes back to the difference between urban and rural America. Most specifically, the more rural areas used slaves because the more rural areas were by nature agrarian, and you would need to have more human resources because we didn't have machines, et cetera, at that time. So you would have, I believe it was a 3/5 compromise. So to apportion representation amongst the states in the House, a human being was not counted as a full human being. It was 3/5 of a human being, 60% of a human being, in order to make a compromise so all these states would join into a union format. But it's really important to break these down, I feel, and get the definitions out, that this is the form of government we find ourselves in, such that we have a separation of powers and there's a check and a balance. So obviously we're constrained by the Constitution, but who defines that? Well, the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is now tasked with adjudicating whether laws and regulations are constitutionally permissible or not.
And again, constitutionally at the federal level, because if not, then it's like, okay, now it's state and local and the people. It's your baby, not our baby, kind of a thing.
Well, there's also like state Supreme Courts, et cetera. So you do have court levels at both the federal and the state level. That's exactly right, and they deal with different issues. So, you can have. Well, let's just go back to the very beginning of how do we create. What is the government doing? It's creating laws, right? It's creating a bill. It's creating a law. And you would have the two sides of the legislature come up with some legal point of view, outline something or apportioning money to something, what have you, regulating something. And these two bodies would then, be able to vote and majority vote to get a pass fail of a piece of legislation, a bill, and then that bill, once passed, if passed, would then go to the executive branch to be signed into law or vetoed. And if it is vetoed by the executive branch, it comes back, and the veto can be overturned, I think with 2/3 majority, I believe, in the legislative body. But then once again, still, these have to be constitutionally valid laws. So we could be challenged in a court of law to say, even though it went through the process in the House, like if you had, classic example, 4 wolves and a sheep voting for what's for dinner. The point of having a constitutional constraint on just a pure democracy is, it doesn't matter if the 4 wolves want to eat sheep for dinner, lamb or whatever. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. Therefore, even if you have a Democratic majority, right, they have 4 against 1 on what to eat. The sheep says, I want grass, right, of course. Well, you can't just eat the sheep.
Yeah.
we have a limit here. This goes back to freedom of speech, et cetera, stuff like that. So you cannot just say because we have a democratic process and all these people vote for such a thing that it's going to become a law and is going to be valid. We have a constraint upon the population in general that is the Constitution. And then layers of Constitution, being the federal Constitution and state constitutions, et cetera. So just to get back to these very basic points, I think, is to understand what real governance is. It is not a political party. Governance is what we're talking about right now, the mechanism of the government of the United States, which then is managed by human beings, and these human beings collect themselves into typically parties or groups or tribes. And so right now we would think, hey, everything seems to be red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat. So the government must be Republicans or Democrats. And I'm just saying that can't be farther from the truth. So.
Yeah. Nice summary of the current kind of climate, as it were, and to start from. And so from here, Bob, you have a few ideas, some of which you've shared with me in the past, some that are brand new. I'm very excited to dive into this. So anything else to cover baseline wise, or are you ready to jump in?
Any pushback from that? Anything I've missed or covered over or misstated that you guys could catch before we move forward?
The only thing I want to bring up is I truly believe that our system is like one of the best inventions of humanity. But I think when we talk about checks and balances, and I think we've seen it more recently, who's checking the Supreme Court? And how is that balanced? Because to me, that's a huge issue that basically through oversight or intention, we have a group of people that are not elected by the population who serve for life and can't be removed.
And that's the only position in government.
And
that's the appointment for life, correct?
The only position that these people are not democratically elected. There is no democratic way to remove them from power. And they decide, basically, how they want to interpret the Constitution.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's a starting point of how we fix this stuff.
Well, let's bring something up. I think this is very fascinating. It's a really shining a bright light on some of the fuzziness of the Constitution or the fact that it has changed. I'm going to call back to a little bit different angle just to make an analogy here, which is, I believe it's the 17th Amendment. So the 17th Amendment removed the selection of senators from a process governed by the states to a direct election. So once upon a time, when we started this thing off, U.S. senators were not elected. U.S. senators, I believe, were nominated by governors, and then the House and Senate or maybe just the Senate, I can't recall, but the legislature of each state would then vote on the nominee, a la Supreme Court. So today's example is the president nominates a Supreme Court justice, and then the Senate confirms. And then they sit for life. But it's not an elected process. There's a confirmation process of a nominee from a representative, meaning the president was democratically elected in the Electoral College sense to represent the people, and in so doing is authorized to nominate an individual when an opening arises to sit on the Supreme Court, and then that nominee is confirmed or not through the U.S. Senate alone. And then unless they are, killed or they die or something like that, they sit for life. So the
Or
point
they can
is,
choose, right? They can choose to retire also, right?
yes, sir. You're right. They can choose to retire. You're right. But there is the point being in the judicial sense, as opposed to term limits. So House of Representatives is 2 years, Senate 6, President is now 4 after FDR, et cetera. That we have considered a term limit for our governance, other than for the judicial branch, which for the most part, I don't know all the levels of. I think it's called the Article 3 branch of government, or Article 3 level of the judiciary, which means the ones that are appointed for life. Article 3 referring to the Constitution. But the point is, I think Tucker's got a extremely, bright light on this one aspect of our level of governance that is different than all the rest. It's like, which one is not like the rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do exactly with a lifetime appointment.
Right.
But the appointment might change. So in the Constitution, it doesn't necessarily say 9 justices. I believe, I can't remember the exact verbiage, but it has to do with our Congress defines the Constitution, defines the number of Supreme Court justices and defines the process. So I think there is a legislative component that creates the judicial component, which is kind of weird, in that it's not strictly spelled out in the Constitution. There, it doesn't say exactly how it works. It's kind of hand wavy at this point. But the point is that there once was a similar aspect with U.S. senators. So U.S. senators were not always voted as a popular vote to sit to represent each state. You would then have a second tier of representation. So the founders put forth, you would vote for your state House and Senate and your governor. And then when it came to the Senate, your governor would nominate and then your state House would vote. So it was like a double tier representation, which is quite fascinating. So things have changed. And I mean, we could have a long discussion just about what happened there. I think 17th Amendment is a very powerful inflection point in our country, in that we went away from this double tiered representation for senator to a direct vote for senator, a direct popular vote for senator, democratic vote for senators. So this will blend nicely into the concept that I put forth now for how do we not just complain about things, but how would we
right.
change things and make a change, right? This is what we're talking about. But without changing governance. So governance is what it is. I think there's a very valid case to be made for rule of law, not rule by human beings. So before anything happens, we need to set the rule of the game before we play. And if there's rules already in place, we have to play according to that. We may want to sit down and change the rules, but we can't pretend that they're not there. So our system of governance should be playing by a set of rules. They're not human beings with whims and wishes and wants and whatever they want to do. And then we just go along with it because there's a human being sitting in the chair. I think we play the game according to the set of rules. So the point.
One piece I'll chime in here that I don't think I've heard either of you say yet. And just to my 2 cents on the recap and where we are. I just full disclosure, I'm no civics aficionado. Like, a lot of this isn't in my wheelhouse of what I'm passionate about. So as far as like if everything's like accurate, it sounds very familiar to my memories of civics classes I took like in the past. I agree with both of you. I think this form of government seems to be the best, I would say, like so far. But one I think key factor in the whole formula and the whole soup that I think is important to keep in mind is time and change, right? And so I think that's a piece that I don't hear about as much as as something that is flexible and fungible and okay, it makes sense sometimes that we can look back 200 years. This is what the law was. This is what was decided the best thing to do. Okay, well, it's 200 years later now. Like, is it still the best thing? Like, I think those are important questions to have. So, and I think that comes up in some of your points too. So that was the
Well, I think
piece I
that's
wanted to chime in
And
on.
I think it's important that it is an evolutionary process, and it's,
Hmm.
to me, frankly, it's kind of frightening that we have elected officials running this country who the hottest technology of their time when they were young was radio.
Hmm.
And it's like
Yeah,
we need to have a government that's cognizant of the times that we currently live in,
right,
not the times that they reminisce about,
right.
because there is no going backwards.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So
the
yeah,
the
until our
nostalgia of a past time, the reality of returning to that is when you look at it at its face is horrifying, because something horrifying would have to happen to society to go back to that time.
horrifying or completely evolve, because I was about to say, like, until the human species is able to perceive time in more than just one direction, right? Until we evolve, until our consciousness evolves into something that can actually, realize the Jeremy Bearimy of time. This is where we're at, man.
Yeah.
Father Time is one direction, and it's pissing in the wind if we,
but the
to
but
your
the
point,
framers
Tucker.
the framers did put forth an evolutionary process incorporated into an amendment system. So I think they
Yeah,
were
yeah.
prescient in realizing that this
Which is pretty
cannot.
cool. Yeah.
Oh, it's the coolest, guys. It's the
Yeah.
coolest. It's a living thing. It's not
Right.
like, I'm not going to try to knock on anyone, so I'm going to use all the ancient dogmas here. It's not the Torah. It's not the New Testament. It's
Hmm.
not
Yeah.
the I apologize. What is the scripture for Muslims? It's
The Quran.
Koran.
thank you. It's not the Quran. See, the thing with these documents, by the way, you guys know my position on these. I'm a huge fan of the metaphorical truths encoded within them, but they're fixed in time. You can't go back and
Yeah.
say, what would Jesus say now? You're
Right.
stuck. You're stuck with the way it is. Whereas the Constitution is not trying to say this is the way it is for all time.
Yeah.
And
So
that's part of the strength of the thing. I think it's the strongest component. We talked about separation of powers and constitutional constraint, et cetera. But the biggest part is that this thing lives. We could do it today, and this goes directly to my point, gentlemen. We have a sick form of politics. If we were able to unify our political differences to make true progress, we could amend the Constitution to do better. And that's what I think we need to do. I think we do need to make progress in the constitutional level. So go back to the fact that we're in a game with rules. And if you want to change the outcome, it's not by cheating, it's by having this conversation with all 50 states and have a referendum to update the rules of the game, and then we can proceed. But I feel like we're so divided that the fact that it's literally an impossibility in current
right. Yeah, I
current
totally agree
politics.
that. Yeah, it's I can't even remember last time I heard someone say something like that, because it does seem like it's just,
I
which
think it
side are
was
you on, win or
ERA.
lose, one
I
or
want to
the
say that.
other.
Well, I think there was like an equal rights amendment that was brought up in, I want to say, like the 70s or 80s or something, where where the last real case of, hey, let's change the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, I want to say it was 50 years ago. And I don't think there's been a peep since of anybody realistically saying, let's change the Constitution. Let's update and add another amendment.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, so let's dive into your ideas here. Last bit I'll share, because any excuse to share the wisdom of Irshad Manji, I'll jump at usually. But just recently I saw on LinkedIn, she just, again, she's a poet. She has just a way of putting words together in a nice, like, easy to remember way. But I think the important part is like the ideas and the conversations that these small quips, encourage. And what it was either or suffocates, both and liberates. Love it. So anyway,
Yes. So that is the spirit of what we're about to talk about. So let's get at the strategic level. I think we've had a real poor strategic level of politics for my entire lifetime. What I mean by that is, presumably, we can agree that the vast majority of power, if not 100% of the levers of power, are controlled by one of two political parties. And these political parties, Republicans and Democrats, are private organizations. So our government is controlled in total, effectively, if not literally, by two private parties, two private organizations that are not a function of the government. They're a function of collections of people with rules. So they're coming together, Republicans and Democrats, and they're making their own rules. But as a collective, as a team, they are able to control the levers of power that we just discussed, all the forms of governance that the founders set forth. But it's all moot if you have corruption in the two parties, the two private organizations that run everything, that actually sit in the chairs and run everything. We have what I would call a duopoly, so a two-party monopoly, where if you just had a single party, people would be awake to the fact that things suck and they're getting worse, and people would point a finger. But because you have two halves of the same coin, every 4 or 8 years or so, they can point the finger at the other guy,
right?
And just keep passing the potato back and forth, hot potato,
yeah,
which kind of hypnotizes the population into thinking there's a true choice here, when in reality, it's just a political class. Whatever, there's a lot of euphemisms, deep state, the establishment, the political class, which is not too far from the truth, to be honest. I mean, it's a little bit jokey, but the reality is, when was the last president that wasn't a Republican or a Democrat?
Right. When was the last time anybody ran for president that wasn't and got close? Well, I mean, in our lifetime, Ross Perot, right?
Yeah, that had a chance, Ross Perot, and then he blew it by. Well, I think, wasn't it talking about aliens or something? Like he got.
My understanding is, if you look backwards now, at the moment in the time, things like that were popping up. But my understanding is, looking backwards, it's understood that he was pressured to drop out.
Oh, no kidding.
By the quote unquote deep state. And we go back to Kennedy. I would love to do a conspiracy theory episode one time, because I think we had a major shift in America as far as leadership goes with the assassination of JFK. And let's not get started. That's a whole separate thing. But
sure, yeah.
The point is, I think we can all say with good faith that we don't have choices, really. And I saw this meme come up recently. This year, with Biden not going for re-election, is the first year since '76 that there has not been a Bush, a Biden, or a Clinton on the ticket. Believe me, how dumbfounded I was. I was born in '76, y'all. So 47 years. So in the last 47 years, there's been one of those three family members, a Bush, a Clinton, or a Biden, in every election.
Every presidential election?
Yes, every presidential election in the United States of America.
Wow.
Yeah, that's insane.
Just think about that.
Wow.
Because people will recall Bush Sr. was vice president for Reagan, to go way back to the beginnings, etc. But and Biden tried to be president back when he was a senator or junior senator. Anyway. The point is, we're stuck with this creeping, crawling, insidious, tentacle type attack of encroaching upon our civil liberties and our freedoms. And at the structural level, why does not a third party ever take hold? Right. Why can we not get any third party? And here's my point. There's a strategic error at play, which is all the third parties are the Ross Perot style, Green Party style, Nader, something like that, where you have somebody who is a charismatic individual who tries to become a leader and wrest power away from the duopoly. And then they triangulate on that individual or that third party, and the duopoly shuts it down. And they're just overwhelming, by the way. There is no practical way to run a third-party candidate for president.
Nope.
It just doesn't make any sense. It's strategically stupid, in my opinion. It's literally like it's stupidity.
Currently.
No, in any sense of leading the charge with a executive branch takeover. My point is, it's impossible to do this, to break in with a third party in the executive branch. It's literally impossible without establishment of a ground level grassroots base. So you have to, instead of attacking top down, you have to attack bottom up. And this is where it gets very, very interesting. Going back to the senators and the judicial branch. So there's a unique strategic vulnerability in the system, which has to do with what Tucker was mentioning about the judges. So a lot of what's going in now is a proxy vote for the presidency, in that we want our guy, whoever that may be, or our gal, whoever that may be, to be the one to appoint the next Supreme Court justice. And by appoint, I mean nominate, because then it has to be confirmed through the Senate. But the point is, even if your Senate nominee is not confirmed, you get the next one to nominate as well, et cetera, all the way down the line. And so what we are now fighting are proxy wars every cycle to get, quote unquote, our guy or our gal on the bench. Because what is happening is we have no cohesion on the legislative or executive side to push forward things. We're really fighting a war on constitutionality of things. So it's like a backdoor governance through the bench. So instead of governing appropriately with constitutional legislative bodies, we're just trying to attack each other through a interpretation of the Constitution. And to get there, you have to get your nominee on the bench. So everybody thinks, in my opinion, everybody's a broad statement, obviously, but everybody thinks that the real value to their side winning, because so many people are apathetic now, turned off by the process. It's disgusting. It's overwhelming. It's obnoxious. It's noxious. It's just the combination of election cycles are off-putting to most decent human beings that I've met in this country. I mean, you have some very, rabid, polar people that love to be on a team, back to the point of like, hey, it's your team versus my team. We're not really talking about philosophy here. It's politics. I got to win.
Yeah, right.
They just want the power. They want to win. They want to win. Such that, let me give an example. So I'm in Montana. And Montana is a pretty red state. But we have a Democratic Senator Tester. Okay? And he's
Tester? Oh, that's his name?
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha.
He's a Democrat, but he's a Montana guy. So he's got the Montana credibility. But he's a Democrat. We have a new candidate for senator who's a Republican named Sheehy. Sheehy's this guy who's a rich man, bought a bunch of property up in very schwanky areas of Montana that people look down upon, quote unquote people, the average Montana guy talks shit about the Big Sky area, which is a place that's very, very rich people. So all the billionaires come to buy up this place, and it's unaffordable now. So lack of affordability is being driven by import people who are coming in and buying these places up. And this guy, she is, like a Navy SEAL, fighter pilot, super duper alpha guy, whatever you want to call him. I don't know too much about him, but the point of the story is this. He's new. He's new to Montana. So all the ads, because I'm inundated with ads constantly. Anytime I look at anything, there's ads about the Senate race. But it's all about the same thing. He is a new guy who just came in. He's buying up property. He's driving up the prices. Whereas Tester, he's a Montana guy. He's been here the whole time. And my point is this. In my opinion, we don't know this for a fact, but in my opinion, if we were to reverse the roles such that the Democrat was new guy coming in with all the money, buying stuff up, and the Republican had been here all along, I bet you both parties would change their tune. So the Republicans are saying, no. This guy is a military veteran. He brings money to the state. He's very smart. He's got a business. He owns Bridger Aerospace. He's a really fantastic guy. Just because he moved here a couple years ago, not a big deal. Democrats, it's all about how long you've been here. You have to have been born in Montana. You have to have been born with grass in your mouth, riding a horse, etc.
Yeah.
Whereas my point is, I'm guessing if the roles were reversed, the narratives would shift.
Yeah.
And the Democrats who are attacking Sheehy for one thing and one thing alone, which is he came into the state just recently.
Yeah.
They would now be singing the tune of all the things that the Republicans are saying. My point is, it's all a show.
Yeah, like the actual reality of the thing, who the guy is, what his values are. It sounds like that's secondary to like the party,
Power.
Yeah.
It's
modern politics has more to do with groups understanding human psychology than it does any desire to create a better society.
There's no truth here, guys. That's
Exactly.
exactly right. There's no truth.
It's like gamification gone wrong. It's like,
Yep.
there's a good way to gamify things, but this, oh man,
Yeah.
here's what not to do.
It should be based on principle. This one thing above all else.
Yeah.
This one thing above all else should be about the principle of the governance, the best for the most people. We're all in it together. We're all on the same team.
Right. Yeah.
But what I'm guessing is we meaning the political system, backs into the narrative after the decision has been made. We're going to back whoever's our best candidate.
Yep.
And how are we going to back them? Well, whatever narrative fits. We'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
We just want the winning horse. Once we get the winning horse in place,
Yeah.
we're going to now create the narrative that supports that horse and demonizes the opposition horse every fucking time. And I'm sick of it.
Me too. I was about to say, like, I'm ready for something different. So yeah, hit us with it, Bob. Like,
okay.
Before we go into Bob's thing, I do want to say, like, I'm neither Democrat nor Republican. I think they're both flawed ideologies in their own right. But I think we had a turning point politically with Newt Gingrich, where he basically created this whole idea that if you're Republican, you don't sit at a table and have dinner with a Democrat. If you're both senators, like you don't sit at the same table. Like you are not working together. You are opposition parties, and that's never the way it was supposed to be. You were supposed to have groups working towards creating a better idea. And you only get that by having the conversation. You don't get that by standing across the aisle and flinging shit at each other. Like we're not chimpanzees.
Right.
But that's what we're working towards currently, is just flinging crap.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. Like nobody is having conversations that lead to better ideas. The conversations aren't happening.
Yeah. Heed the words of the Oracle in Matrix Reloaded. Interested in the future, and I know the only way to get there is together.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
But the really great point is this horseshoe effect, meaning as you drive to each pole, meaning the left and right of the bar of iron, it bends itself so these two poles come together like a horseshoe. And the vast middle is excluded.
Yep.
So we have this apathetic middle, and I count myself exactly the same way, Tucker. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. And I'll give you my last time I was ever in the process was Ron Paul. Yeah, Ron Paul. Ron Paul against Mitt Romney. In the sense that Ron never got the nomination, but I supported Ron Paul. And that I can't remember anybody prior to Ron Paul that excited me. So that was, I want to say 2012-ish, something like that, 2011, 2012, I think. I believe. It's a long time ago. But,
yeah, right.
But but I saw, I saw behind the curtain, so to speak, about how the system was really run, and it was not going to be fair to Ron Paul. He was not given a fair shake. Not that he would have gotten the nomination, but things happened.
Well, I mean, Same with Bernie Sanders when, what was it, 2016?
Yep, exactly.
You know,
That's exactly what I'm talking
people
about. It's literally
people
identical.
want a change. They can see that what is currently happening is not working, but the powers that be, the established parties, are pretty happy with the way it is.
They don't want
Because
an outsider in. They don't want an outsider.
because
That's
they
exactly it.
control it, and it's all greed. It is 100% all greed. They control the piggy bank, and it's very lucrative for them, and they don't want to change it. And so when somebody threatens the way things are currently working, they have their mechanisms to make sure that that change is not even an option. You're not even given the choice of change.
It's a rigged game, Tucker.
It
It's a
is.
rigged game. Yeah, I agree. That happened to Bernie, happened to Ron Paul, exactly, where the party themselves backstabbed their own person, meaning their own party member was backstabbed because they had the audacity to try and make a go of it on the ideas alone. I couldn't agree
Yep.
more. That's exactly.
And
what it is.
honestly, we kind of saw what happens when an outsider gets in. Like Donald Trump is the Republican Party now. He is.
That's an
They
interesting point there.
that party sold their soul to a single individual, and now he is that party.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the future for Republicans look like, but it's not. I don't think it's in their hands anymore the way it was before, and so I really feel like the Democrats are probably taking note of this and going, we are not going to allow that to happen to us. Like, you are party line and you speak to the party, or you won't have a voice. And it's smart of them, but I think it's bad for us.
But let's
Interesting.
talk about, I think that's very, very interesting point of view, and I agree with everything. I think there's a shelf life for cult of personality, meaning each individual is only viable for so long. So in the big scheme of things, they come and go. But the mechanism is what I'm interested at the strategic level. So here's the breakdown. So let's say third party X. How do we make it viable? How is it even possible to get a third party in and wrest away control, levers of power in some way, shape, or form over the long term? Here's my take. You guys remember the show is called Survivor way back in the day? Okay. Survivor.
I think it's still on.
I think it is too. I'm
It
sure
is.
Anyway,
it's
is.
probably cash cow.
Like season 70 or something.
Probably. But here's the point.
Fun fact real quick. Bob Geldof, I think he's the one who started that show, but Bob Geldof, he was in a band called the Boomtowners, but he's Pink in The Wall, Pink Floyd The Wall. He's the guy who plays Pink. Anyway,
that is cool.
Fun fact.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
So everybody knows the successful practitioners, they usually have an alliance. And there'll be an alliance of two at least. I mean, but you could have more, but let's just say two. You have your final two alliance, right? So all these random people, let's say 20 people, are dropped into this environment, and every week they have to do a tribal council and vote people off. And there's a lot of random stuff that happens in the beginning, and luck, etc. But eventually you get down to the fewer and fewer contestants, and strategy becomes super important. So let's say in a hypothetical, we're down to the final five. So you have one pair of two, second pair of two, and a single individual. Everybody knows once you're down to the final five and you don't have a partner with you, you don't have an alliance, your time is pretty much up, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have two strong pairs and a single individual who looks extremely vulnerable. But at the stage of the game where it's the final five, everybody knows that one pair is voting for one of their enemy pairs, and the other enemy pair is voting for one of the other guy's enemy pair. So there's a deadlock. And so the deciding vote is always that fifth tribe member. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at round five, even though the single person is never going to make it to the end, and they are without a partner to help consolidate votes. Because what you're trying to do is coordinate your votes with trust. So someone doesn't stab you in the back. You say, look, let's just say there's A and B and, X and Y. So A and B are going to consolidate their votes and they're going to vote for X together. Because if you split your votes, you're wasting it. So then X and Y, they consolidate their votes and they say, we're going to vote for A. So it always comes down to Z or whatever, this fifth guy out or fifth lady out, to essentially break the deadlock and make a tiebreaker. And this is the point of vulnerability of our system right now. Meaning, analogous to, we can't get any constitutional amendments because there's nothing more than a very thin majority on either side, and no side will compromise. We can't get compromise on judicial nominees such that they're, middle of the road. They're always extreme. We can't get any sort of compromise about the extreme nature of the executive branch politicians at this point. They seem to be, no centrists. They're always polar opposites. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we're at the point of vulnerability in the system for a third party to come in and exploit this one loophole. And the one loophole is each state gets 2 senators. So it doesn't matter what size your state is. It could be California or Rhode Island. You get 2 senators. And different states have different levels of population. So take 3 low population states. Let's just call it Montana, Rhode Island, and Alaska. If those 3 states could be pulled or persuaded to join a third party such that they elect senators that are of that third party would get 6 Senate seats. And the fact that we are so divided, narrowly divided in the Senate for anything to happen with confirmations or legislation, there's not going to be any crossover in the aisles such that Republicans will cross over. This is all a Newt Gingrich. There's no crossing over. We don't go on to the other side of the aisle ever again.
Yeah.
We don't vote for them. They don't vote for us. It's whoever gets the majority. There's no compromise. There's no real legislation. I think you hit the ball out of the park with that analysis, Tucker. It's winner take all. So the fragility of winner take all is if you get that 6 votes in, well, now both parties have to cater to the 5th survivor. So even though you only get 6 votes, if they vote as a block and they say, we're not voting for either side unless we are heard, now you have some influence.
Yeah.
So there's no way to influence at the executive level because you're not going to win the presidency where you have 270 electoral votes. That's just not feasible for a third party. And you're not going to have influence in the House of Representatives that are based on population because there's 4 states, Texas, California, New York, and Florida, that make up like 40% of the electoral votes. So it's like there's just unless you're starting on top, meaning like you draft in Oprah, or Arnold Schwarzenegger or John Cena or something. You have to get a super point. This is Tom Hanks, right? This is the next level. Is the only way to make stuff work is to have a popular candidate like an Oprah just overwhelm everybody with popularity. Okay, assuming that's worst case scenario, a la Trump, like it's just a cult of personality at that point. That's not how you build a party. What I'm envisioning is a third party built on a strategy of taking over 3 states that are low population. And I want 3 specific states, categorically, not specifically. I want 1 state that's conservative, 1 that is liberal, and 1 that is centrist. So what I'm trying to do is a proof of concept that we can have a 2-tiered system where at the federal level, we have to agree, and at the state and local level, we agree to disagree. That's a republic.
Yeah.
And so we have 3. Sorry, you guys got anything right there? Any questions?
Maybe I missed it, but what was the reasoning behind low population?
They're the only ones that you could actually feasibly get the thin edge of the wedge in to create a third party. So if we were trying to take over Texas, let's just say, which is kind of purplish now, it doesn't matter if it's like teetering between red and blue to try to pull enough Texans away to yellow. Let's pick a totally different color. Green. I don't give a shit. Whatever. Green's been used. Let's say yellow. Yeah. Okay, third party is going to be yellow party now. To try to pull enough of the millions of people from red or blue in Texas is extremely difficult.
Gotcha.
Mathematically. Just if we had Rhode Island, Alaska, and Montana, I think they're both around 1 million people, 750,000 to a little bit over 1 million, somewhere in that ballpark. You actually have a shot. I mean, it's literally doable. It's literally feasible to take very low population states and either through persuasion or relocation to, like look at Bernie, Vermont, right? Very low population state. Bernie Sanders was Vermont. So he was, he backed out of being a Democrat and went independent. So you can take these very tiny states and shuffle around the winners and losers. The problem is right now, if you were to be a quote unquote independent, you would then have to caucus with one side or the other. So you kind of have to pick a side at that point with the current nature of things. But what I'm saying is you're taking a strategic stand. You're trying to make a change. You're trying to get in and break the system up. The only way I can see it possibly happening is for 3 low population states to all pick the same third party intentionally, have a unification of the federal point of view, the planks of the party platform, and allow each other to self-govern individually and at the state level for all the other stuff. So right now, if you wanted to be a liberal party or a conservative party or independent party, whatever that may be, you're alienating some form of the electorate. What I'm saying is I want to have a solution that takes into account people who are diametrically opposed in serious issues. This is the prototype. This is the proof of concept of how adults would govern a giant nation like ours. Is agree that we're not going to agree to all things. Agree that at the federal level, we have to be unified. So we need to narrow the scope of what it means to have federal governance and broaden the scope of what it means to have individual rights and states' rights. And then based on your geography, if it's unpalatable for you to be in a conservative state, then move to the centrist or liberal state and vice versa. And that would allow for the best case scenario, because we're at the point of there are issues out there that are just unresolvable, in my opinion. There's just issues that are not based on fact. They're point of view issues. There are issues that are not going to be compromisable. You're just going to have to say one side picks this way. Like someone likes vanilla, this other guy likes chocolate. You're never going to convince them otherwise. Well, maybe the vanilla guy just has to go move to where vanilla is and the chocolate guy just moves to where the chocolate is. And what can we agree on? Well, we can agree on these other things. Like whipped cream tastes good on both. I just thought of that, by the way. I like that.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Thank you. I have said for years that I think the political parties know exactly what they're doing as far as some of these wedge issues. And you look at gay rights, you look at abortion, and these are huge issues that people vote party line in every election on. And these people who vote this way will not change their point of view on that. They're not interested in having a conversation about it. This is what they believe, and they're going to vote for Party A or Party B because of that. And I think this was done intentionally, but there are 2 issues that do not affect you at all unless you choose to participate in it.
Bingo. That's it exactly.
And so they use these issues as huge ideologies for these parties in the modern times that says if you are pro-abortion or you are pro-choice, I don't think anybody's pro-abortion. I'm sure there's some people, but if you are pro-choice, you vote blue. And if you are pro-life, you vote red. But that is not something that affects your life at all unless you choose to participate in that activity. And so it's almost like they've created this societal anxiety reaction where it's like you are anxious about this situation happening, but in complete control of whether it happens or not. And it just paralyzes people. Like,
Yeah.
but they don't realize everything they're giving up as far as actual real leadership and governance by allowing their whole voting pattern be dictated by two things that you have to choose to participate in for them to affect you. Instead of going, I'm going to set these issues aside because it doesn't affect me, and I'm going to vote for politicians who actually have a platform, an idea, a modicum of respect or willingness to even do the job. And we don't have that.
Mm.
We have people who are willing to set aside their own ethics and say words they don't even believe because that's all they have to do to get elected.
Yeah.
And once they're there, they're set for life.
I think you're combining two important topics: single issue voters and wedge issues. I think that's exactly it. That's the tactic at hand to split us up: is single issue voters and wedge issues. 100%.
Yeah. Can we go back to the chocolate vanilla thing? Because there's a piece here I wanted to just make sure I
Cherry?
not like miss under cherry. Yeah. Where does
Cherry on top?
maraschino or marinated?
Oh, it's definitely
Marinated
marinated in bourbon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
marinated
there
black
you go.
cherries. Are you kidding me? Anyway, but
Whipped cream.
I
Can
did-
we agree on the whipped cream? How about that?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
but I didn't know if it was a literal or a metaphor thing. But like the moving piece where you were talking about like people move. Were you saying like if a person lives in a place and it's kind of for this ideology and they're not into it, they move?
To
Is that what you're
Tucker's
saying?
point, if you are a single issue voter and you find yourself, quote unquote, trapped on that single issue, whatever it may be, such that it's intolerable, I would rather have the choice to move to another state than have a winner take all at the federal level. And now I'm pissed at the world.
Yeah.
So I'm giving someone an opportunity to move, to say, look, I could be super comfy in my own bed, in this own blanket, at the temperature I like it, the window's closed, I've got a knit cap on. Versus you could move and the window's open, you have one light sheet and the fan is on and you sleep naked. Like there's going to be a difference in this, how it feels to be a kind of person. And what I think we're agreeing on is right now it's a winner take all death match, knife fight, where we're trying to kill our opponent so we can have it our way, always, all the time, our way, 100% of the way. No compromise. And we're going to push it down all the way to the state, local, and individual level, whatever we want it to be. Whatever the topic is, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is my compromise is we have to have a veneer of agreement at the federal level, the farthest outside layer. We have to agree to agree. There has to be adults in the room guiding the ship. We can't just be fighting over the wheel as we run into a iceberg and sink us all. Then everything below that is compartmentalized. So if you want to be on the port side because of whatever reason, have at it. I'm on starboard. And someone's in the aft and someone's in the foredeck and whatever. We can agree to just disagree. Now, if that means you have to move because you are so adamant about this one topic, this one issue, at least you have a choice. Might not be ideal, might not be best case scenario, but the worst case scenario is, okay, red team won this round. They're going to push down on all the lower levels, their choice, 100% of the way. You're sleeping in a room with the windows open and you hate it. So what are you going to do? You're going to see red, meaning anger, everywhere, constantly, everywhere you go, because you have no escape. The leader of the federal side has now taken over what everybody how they have to sleep in their room. There's no way out. There's no escape. It's all or nothing. And I'm
Yeah.
saying all or nothing is going to breed antagonism
Mhm.
and strife. And it's going to have people wanting to metaphorically kill each other, if not literally. And that's where we find ourselves today. Is
Yeah.
in a situation where it's all or nothing, single issue votes, and wedge issues everywhere. So I know we've had this conversation, John. I do feel your pain about the edge cases here. What if you're, what if you like where you live? What if you have a family?
Well,
They're
yeah,
not gonna move? What if you
I
have
wanted,
money? What-
yeah, because I wanted to. I think it's worth unpacking or digging into a little bit more.
I agree.
And by the way, just checking the time. There are two like big points that I see that I know in your plan that I think let's plan for that for part two, because there's not enough time to get into them, and they deserve a lot of time to get. So if you guys are okay with that, we'll kind of finish
I
on
see
this.
this one turning into multiple parts
Yeah,
because
yeah,
there's
good. Okay, cool.
there's a whole election process that I think should at least be attempted as far
Yeah.
as just trying to shake up what's going on right now and a
Yeah.
more I don't know, considerate and empathetic way of governing instead
Yeah.
of the negativity. So I think we're gonna carry on. I'm guessing I'm gonna do the over under. I'm guessing 4 on this one
Yeah, that's a
before
fair
we
one.
move on to
I
something
don't.
else.
Yeah, I don't know where
I'll
I want
take
to
the
vote, but I
under.
like.
I'll take the under, but I agree it's going to be multi-part. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So back to the thing, because maybe you haven't thought down into the minutia of this, but I'm curious. Like this concept that somebody is like, yeah, I would be happier in this other state. Like, because what I guess I'm saying is, that does exist now, right? I mean, nobody nobody lives in a state where it's like you can't leave this state. You have to. Everybody, as far as I'm aware, well, I'm sure there's some.
There's financial
Well,
shackles in many and that's why like I think that's hard to do because there are many people who are literally living paycheck to paycheck, and there is no financial mechanism for them to just pick up
right.
and
So
move
that's
their
what I
entire
was.
life.
Yeah. So that's what I was gonna say is like, does this become a function of the government? Like, we will like. Okay, here's a good example. I worked at Wells Fargo for 17 years. They didn't want, they wanted to centralize people so they could be face to face in like 6 hubs across the country. I live in Colorado. Colorado wasn't one of those hubs. If I wanted to move, they would have helped me move
Yes.
financially, is what I mean. They would have helped. So the question is like, Bob, and if you haven't thought about this, totally fair. But I am curious. Do you think that that becomes something that the government helps you? Like, hey, yeah, this place you live, it's kind of more on this ideology. Maybe you're this kind of one issue voter type of thing. You're recognizing you might be happier here. We'll help you move. Do you think that's realistic and feasible, or is it still just up to the person to
I think it's
like?
a fair question. I think it's well played to look at real world implications of this. So I think it's worth the hypothetical. Let me back up a little bit though in saying that I anticipated the hypothetical by picking 3 states that are already categorically in line, meaning
Mm,
take Montana as a red state, take Rhode Island as a blue state, take Alaska as a purple state.
gotcha.
So I've already anticipated minimizing the potential. Like I'm not trying to overcome a bunch of people's political points of view. I'm trying
Yeah.
to, use what
Take.
we have.
Yeah. Find the advantage of what already exists.
Correct. So we
Yeah.
can move these around. These are not like exact, like it's got to be these 3 states or whatever. I mean, you could
Yeah.
look at the list of states that are about 1 million or less, somewhere in that ballpark,
Right.
1.5 million and less. And then
I mean,
in my opinion, I would want to find one that's pretty heavily conservative, one that's pretty heavily liberal, and then one that's kind of right in the middle.
yeah.
So
And back to the father time thing. Maybe it's not fixed, right? Maybe every
I agree.
6 years, 10 years, you kind of reevaluate. Hey, for the next
Well,
6 or 10 years, like
this is where
let's try it with these states.
Well, let's go to the next level, because this is exactly the point. I'm not trying to cap it at 3. I'm saying 3 is the first shot.
Yeah, iterative. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an iterative approach, because what I really want to have happen is have a prototype that is a proof of concept. Once that is shown to be true, everybody, quote unquote, the great middle, the silent majority of people who are not vocally polar either way, will wake up and say, holy shit, there's another way here. But it starts at the state and local. I don't have to hold my nose and vote for this nasty guy or that nasty guy or whatever. We don't give a shit. We're just going to start at state and local. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a couple senators that are going to team up and put a thumb in the eye of the duopoly and start being the fifth vote, meaning the back to Survivor. We're going to play on the fact that they're going to have to compromise with us now, because nothing will go forward unless they compromise with each other, proving the point, by the way.
Yeah, right.
You have to compromise enough to appease the middle. Exactly. And I think that's beautiful, because that's the way it should be.
Right.
And here's the proof in the pudding, by the way, gentlemen. Imagine they, meaning the establishment, deep state, whatever you want to call the euphemism of the party, the deep party people, the ones who are in it for the levers of power, not for the good of the group. What if they were to say, I don't like this new party, I don't like where it's going, we're going to start crossing the aisle and compromising now and cut them out? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Like, I think
it's almost like, oh my God.
It's almost like you could have done that all along.
I know, right?
Yeah. So I'm putting that. So there is a concept I'm using here. It's called a fork. I think we might have touched on this a couple times, where in chess, a fork move is one where you're putting your opponent in an impossible situation where they can only move one piece out of jeopardy, but 2 are in jeopardy at the same time. So whichever way they go, either they both hate each other such that they can't form a majority and they have to use the 6 senators to move anything forward, 6 senators in the third party point of view, or in which case, we will slowly move the needle, in the direction of principled governance, compromise, being adults, actually trying to get stuff done. Versus they decide to cut the throat of the third party, thus pulling the curtain back, and everybody will see the man behind the curtain and say, you guys are full of shit. You're obviously we know this already, but you will work with anybody as long as it furthers, the entrenchment of your power position, etc. So that's kind of the concept. But let's talk about scaling up. Back to your point, John, which I think is a fair play. Let's talk about the second iteration. So now we're not with these little tiny states, population-wise, tiny states with very aligned populations already. Let's say we're going to go to another round, or we do another 3 states or whatever, the next 4th state, whatever. And now we're going to have some tension there. I don't think the government should play a role in relocating people. Okay. I do think it should be such that if it's such an intolerable circumstance for you to sleep with the window open, if it is literally like the worst thing on earth, because you love your state, there's no other reason for you to move. You like where you're at, your family's there, your job's there, your kids go to school there. You like the parade every year. You're, whatever. You're president of your HOA. Whatever the thing is, you built your own house with your own 2 hands. Whatever the thing is, you don't want to leave. I get that. I really do. But why not stay and try to work on state and local issues? Meaning, the fact of a left-leaning or right-leaning or centrist local government does not mean it's permanent. I think the conversation should be started at the state and local level. It should be started with, your own neighbors first, your friends, your coworkers, your school board, your city council. Like, this is where the idea should come from, going back to 10th Amendment. Like, the stuff that's really powerful in most people's lives on a day-to-day basis should be empowered through the individual person and the state itself, not the federal government. So breaking the bonds of winner take all, we're going to use a judge to declare your point of view unconstitutional and create your acceptance of this thing whether you like it or not, I think that's cancer. I think
Yeah.
that's cancerous to the process, and it devolves the process to this executive winner take all. We're going to appoint the nominee. We're going to appoint the nominee, and then we're going to vote on it. And we're going to party lines. I got 51 votes, so fuck you. I don't need you. This is literally what happens, by the way. We're getting to the point of, if you have the votes, you will put the legislation up. If you don't have the votes, meaning within your party, if you don't have the votes, you just put nothing out. There's just nothing to be had, because the party lines dictate the vote every time. There's no crossover, and the real game is about, getting a judicial seat somewhere, because that's where the real power now lies, which is a terrible misappropriation of governance.
Yeah.
I will say, on the whole relocation thing, I think any state in its own right would be smart to say, hey, if you want to relocate here, as long as you are employed in this state for the next 5 years, we'll pay your relocation cost. Because they'll recoup that cost in the additional tax they collect off that person in probably 2 years, even at very low income, just through sales tax, through property taxes, through income taxes. They'll recoup that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some good math to be done there that could make,
what about this? I like this idea.
Really make sense.
What about a swap?
Oh,
prisoner swap.
I was about to say hostage swap, but hey,
yeah.
Hey, look, with a
Yeah.
registry, hey, yeah, I'm interested in moving to this state.
Yeah,
Hey, look,
registry.
somebody's interested in moving to my state. And the
Yeah.
like you said, hey, let's just help them, right?
Well, what about the whole way? They're a banker, I'm a banker. They have 2 kids, I have 2 kids. They have blah blah blah. They play golf, I play golf. Whatever. We'll offset everything so the universe stays balanced.
Yeah.
Because what's terrible is, let's just say you're in a district and you're fully blue and your neighbor's fully red. You understand you both offset. There's no progress to be made. You're just offsetting each other. As you vote. So if someone votes D ticket or R ticket all the way down the line, you're really just offsetting each other.
Yeah.
And so what you really are wanting is progress. And so progress of leadership and progress of governance would be furthered by not just everybody piling into one side, but doing these swaps. I think that would be my take, John. It would be to do a registration of, I think that's too simplistic, but I think to the point of what about the people who are stuck and they really want to move, but they don't have material means or whatever? I think there should be some support there.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, this would all be much easier if this country had a functional high-speed rail system.
I love that. I just saw something, by the way. I was talking to some people about this idea about running trains, across the country. But I said in a vacuum tube under the ground. And lo and behold, the Google algorithm came up and showed me that China now has it's above ground, but I think it's called a low pressure tube train, maglev. So it's magnetic levitating in a tube above ground. I said below, but anyway, above ground, that's very low pressure. And these things run about 600 miles an hour.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was one of Elon's little fucking side projects for a while.
Company, right?
But that dude's got equal amounts of money and ADD, and that's just pick one.
Do you know if that got scrapped?
I don't think it's really gone anywhere.
Really?
I know he's done a little bit in Vegas area.
Was that low pressure? I don't think that was low pressure, though. I think that was just underground. I don't know if that was
I thought it was vacuum.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Vacuum type of ultra high speed.
Once you pump the air out, you lose all the resistance, and then you don't have to work as hard to move that train.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, if we did have, this will go to the next topic, by the way, once we hit next episode, actually getting stuff done, actually having a list of feasible projects to do like adults would. Meaning, once upon a time, the U.S. built the interstate highway system, which was the crown jewel of the world for transportation. Like China's doing it now with these, giant trains, Japan, etc. So that's kind of like where we want to go. Is if we can agree on some things, I think we can make actual progress.
Yeah. Nice. Well, cool. Yeah, this is a good place to wrap up, I think. So yeah, I'm super excited about continuing this. I don't know, Bob, do you want to try to tease any of the other things? Actually, let me try, because one of them I'm really excited. You have shared it with me before, and it does have to do with the judicial system. Truly, if you're listening, make sure you check out the next episode, because I think we'll get into it then. And I really like your idea here. So maybe that's all I'll say for teasing. But yeah, this is really good. Thank you guys, as always. Anybody listening, please get a hold of us, sendingpoets@gmail.com. So to finish, this time I decided to ask ChatGPT for a quote that would be good. And actually, my first question was to ChatGPT was, are you familiar with Bartlett's, book of familiar quotations? And it was like, yep, totally familiar. And I was like, can you give me a quote from that refers to politics? So, by the way, I love how like courteous and friendly ChatGPT is with most of its responses. So I'm going to read its response first, and then I'll finish with a quote. But so again, I said, can you give me this quote? Certainly, certainly. One of the famous quotes related to politics that appears in Bartlett's familiar quotations is by the French philosopher Voltaire. This quote, often attributed to Voltaire, reflects the importance of free speech and the defense of one's political beliefs, even if they differ from one's own. Love to hear that kind of stuff. It encapsulates a key principle in political discourse and is frequently cited in discussions about freedom of expressions. But then it says, note, while this quote is often associated with Voltaire, it is widely believed to have been paraphrased by his biographer, Evelyn Beatrice Hall, to summarize his beliefs. So thanks, ChatGPT. But check this quote.
Qualified answer right there.
Yeah, exactly, right. But yeah, so here's the quote. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.